Is the new GX really better than the new Land Cruiser? We'll find out in today's video. I'll include a link to the Mercedes in Farmington's website in the description down below. They're providing us with the GX. Also include a link to my car buying guide. Let's get into it. Powering the GX is a twin-turbo 3.4 liter V6 that goes through a 10-speed. It puts out 349 horsepower, 479 pound-feet of torque. Fuel economy is 15 around town, 21 on the highway, and you can expect to get within that range. Powering the Land Cruiser is a turbo 2.4 liter 4-cylinder hybrid that goes through an 8-speed. It puts out 326 horsepower and 465 pound-feet of torque. Now, fuel economy on this is rated for 22 around town, 25 on the highway. I would say that you're more likely to get on the lower end with that. I'm trying to hit 500,000 subscribers before the end of the year. I'd really appreciate it if you'd help out with that. Since the GX and the Land Cruiser are so similar, because they're built on the same platform, we're mainly going to focus on the differences in today's comparison. The front end of the GX is more angular, especially the bottom section, compared to the Land Cruiser, which is boxier, but you notice that the hood and the windshield and everything are pretty much carryover. Now, the GX comes stock with these 32.5-inch tall tires. The Land Cruiser stock tires are the same size, but I have equipped mine with tires that are a size larger. But something to note, the 25 GX is having 1-inch suspension lift from the factory, whereas 2024 and 2025 Land Cruisers do not. And so since my Land Cruiser has tires that are 1 inch taller and the GX has a 1-inch lift, they actually sit at the same height. So if the GX did have tires that are the same size as my Land Cruiser, it would actually sit taller because it is lifted. But continuing along, again, the theme of boxiness continues with the Land Cruiser, whereas the GX has a mix of angular elements and boxiness. Now, the new Land Cruiser does get an upgraded outlet, but you lose cargo space because of the hybrid battery here in the back, whereas the GX gets less power, but you get way more cargo space here in the back, and there's a built-in air compressor now. And I do want to say the height difference with the load floor is pretty substantial. You're talking about 5 inches roughly. Now, last thing to note, the GX is a little bit longer than the Land Cruiser, and most of that length is bumper overhang rather than actual interior space. But while we're on the topic of the interior, legroom in the Land Cruiser is good. I also have my own climate zone, USB ports too. And I get this nice leather trim here on the seats with this fancier Land Cruiser. Nice trim on the door panel as well. Space in the GX is identical to the Land Cruiser. You can see the vents down below, heated seats, some USB ports. And the trim on the seats is a little bit softer with the GX. Same thing with the door panel. You actually get sunshades here in the back too. Now let's compare capacities. We've got 1,100 pounds of payload capacity with the Land Cruiser, whereas the GX has 1,545 pounds. And back to the Land Cruiser to talk about the interior. Now, the Land Cruiser comes with nice features like memory seats. It's got blind spot monitoring. You have adaptive cruise control. You've got this big digital gauge cluster, 360 camera system with a pretty large infotainment system, dual zone climate with heated and ventilated seats. Got this cool mode select dial to control the drive modes, the multi-terrain select and crawl control. And of course, wireless phone charging pad. You got a real shifter here in the center too. Stabilizer bar disconnect, center and rear diff lock, and a full-time four-wheel drive system. It even comes with a cool box center console, nice trim on top of the center console. And look at that, camera rear view mirror. There's also a sunroof. Now let's compare the GX. So focusing on the differences, the GX has auxiliary switches, whereas the Land Cruiser does not. The gauge cluster is also a little bit different with the theme. And the trim around the steering wheel is softer to the touch. You also have a different style of screen where the climate controls are integrated into the screen rather than below it. And you'll notice no stabilizer bar disconnect because this has EKDSS, which automatically disconnects the sway bars. And then this whole section is laid out a little bit different, like the wireless phone charging pad's behind, and then the center console is a slightly different shape on top, but inside's actually the same, funny enough. And then this doesn't actually have a camera rear view mirror, but you do have a sunroof up top. And I should mention, these fancy seats have massage function. The Land Cruiser does not have that. Now, this Land Cruiser is a first edition, but if you get a 2025 premium with all the options that this first edition has, that's going to set you back about $74,000. And this is an Overtrail Plus, so it's got all of the features. That's going to set you back in the mid-80s, so it's over $10,000 more expensive than the Land Cruiser. Let's see which one performs the best. GX550 Overtrail Plus. Finally. I know I've had quite a few GX reviews, but the hard thing about the GX is they're sold out here in Utah at least. So I can't drive the sold cars, so I had to wait for a used one to get traded in for me to do like a full review like we have today. And I'm really excited. You guys know I own a 250 Land Cruiser, and man, I have been debating buying one of these for the channel because so many people want me to buy it. You know, it's got the V6, that excites a lot of people, and the EKDSS is really cool as well. So we'll see how this performs. I was unimpressed with the 24 GX because of the clearance issues. And I thought it drove a little bit weird. It kind of felt a little bit rattle can. Yeah, that's probably a good way to describe it in certain circumstances. So I'm interested to see if they have fixed what I consider the systemic issues with the GX. One thing that's weird is the GX, even with this 1-inch suspension lift, still drives less truck-like than the Land Cruiser. That's very interesting. I'm gonna wait for this light to go and then I'll get back to you guys. Actually moving now. I will say the low end torque is quite nice. Now, one thing about the GX that I think is really cool is it doesn't taper off. The V6 just seems to have power all the way through. Yeah, okay, so I will say compared to 24, this doesn't corner quite as well. So you do lose a little bit of handling with the 1-inch suspension lift. Now, I don't mind at all. I think this still handles just fine. It still has that kind of interesting flat feel around the corners, which actually, if we pop it into Sport Plus, it changes the steering too. Sport mode. Yeah, it still handles pretty darn flat overall, all things considered. Yeah, we'll just use this to turn around. I haven't reviewed cars here in a while. I just live so far away, so it's kind of hard to get down here. See how the turning is. The steering's still... Oh, I accidentally put it in manual mode. Let's put it back in automatic. Yeah, it still does the body and frame stuff where when you go over bumps, you hear it and everything. It's not bad though. It's definitely not bad at all. I really do like the torque. They pipe in audio. I'm not so sure about that. In the Sport Plus mode, at least. Yeah, this does handle very... Like, it still handles better than the Land Cruiser. Even with the lift from the factory, it still handles better than the Land Cruiser. Interesting. Yeah, let's pop it back into the normal mode. Oh, I'll do comfort, sure. I actually prefer the steering in the comfort normal setting where it's a little bit looser. Still very direct. In summary, the GX550 Overtrail Plus with the new suspension lift, I think is really sharp. You don't really concede anything. I mean, I shouldn't say anything. You don't concede much with this, right? It still handles really well, just not quite as well with the 1-inch suspension lift. And yeah, it seems like it's pretty sorted. So I think that if this didn't have the adaptive dampers and the EKDSS, like if you took the Land Cruiser and lifted that 1-inch, that'd be a different story. But this, it can actually handle the 1-inch suspension lift. So Cruiser back to back with the GX. So I'm pretty sure the Land Cruiser doesn't have any steering adjustments. Let's see. Yeah, it doesn't change with the drive modes with the steering. I was gonna say, I don't remember it doing that. I guess we'll put it in normal mode. By the way, I've got a tire light flashing because I've got to get the tire pressure sensors adjusted. So this obviously isn't a perfect comparison because we've got size larger tires on the Land Cruiser here. But again, the height's about the same because of the lift on the GX, so go with that. So what I'll say right off the bat is the back end of the Land Cruiser actually doesn't bounce around as much as the GX did. Like, especially going on that bump, the GX, the back end kind of went all over the place. And I think I know why that is. So with the GX, you've got the EKDSS, and how that system works is depending on the drive mode you're in will determine if the sway bars are connected or not. And they've built out that system for on-road handling. So when you have it in the on-road driving modes, then what that's going to do is it's going to have everything locked up and tight. So when you go over bumps and everything, yeah, you're really going to feel it. But then off-road, it's going to have the sway bars disconnected. Everything's going to be unlocked loosey-goosey, which means it's going to be a lot more comfortable. So the drive modes in the GX are a lot more important, because, and also the adaptive dampers too, right? Those are firmer, so it just firms everything up. With that being said, me personally, I don't really care about the extra handling with the GX, because I'm not going to drive either of these vehicles like a sports car. What I do think is a huge plus the GX is the engine performance. Just going back to back. Now, one thing to note, the GX does have the smaller tires, so that is going to affect how this feels. But still, even like the top end of this just isn't quite as muscular as the top end of the GX. But I do like that like the V6 is just smoother. That's the thing I do like about that V6. So that's a big plus. And like, this isn't bad, it's just, I would say this engine actually has more character than the V6, because it's kind of like this loud, rambunctious 4-cylinder. It's pretty abrasive, but like, it's got some character. Again, it goes with the truck theme that the Land Cruiser kind of is all about. So, in conclusion, should you go GX, should you go Land Cruiser? Well, I mean, looks, right? I think that we can all agree that the Land Cruiser does objectively look better than the GX for the most part. I actually like the interior of the Land Cruiser more. The GX has a better performing powertrain. It has more sophisticated suspension that has a wider range of use. Like, this is a great daily driver, but again, the handling, it's not horrible. It's just, it's not on the same level as the GX. So the GX definitely handles better. And then the EKDSS, if I remember right, the GX does articulate a little bit better off-road when the sway bars are disconnected with that, with the EKDSS. So that's going to be a bit of a benefit. I mean, this has the sway bar, or so the stabilizer bar disconnect, but that's only going to take you so far. So I think that when you look at the pricing and everything, depending on your use, if you're going to do off-roading on a regular basis, I do still think the Land Cruiser is the better route to go, because you are less money. Like, you literally just do what I did. Stock wheels, 34s, and boom, super capable off-road, and still gets pretty decent. Driving up here, like, this is gonna take a second. Driving up here, I got 21 miles per gallon. So you still get pretty good fuel economy with the bigger tires. The GX, if you're willing to spend, if you're gonna do the off-roading stuff, you gotta be willing to buy bumpers and everything, which is gonna be expensive. So if you're willing to have a bigger budget, the GX is the better rig overall, but you've got to be willing to spend the money. So you've just got to kind of figure that out for yourself. So maybe if you go GX or Land Cruiser, I think that all the people saying that the GX is just better, that Land Cruiser just sucks, the GX is better in certain ways, but the Land Cruiser is more affordable and gives you more equipment at that more affordable price. And it does like 90% of the GX, 95% of the GX. So it's like the GX, it's like slightly better engine performance, slightly better handling, but it's not like night and day. Let me know your thoughts.